brother Philip Tate. Good night, brother.
Hi, Sister Yaya. Good night. How are you doing this evening?
I could do so asleep. How are you being?
Oh, well, that's not my problem. I get enough. But it's Sister Yaya, so I'm certainly sure you'll get someone it's time, no?
Well, I know how to make time for myself. I've just not been making time for myself.
Okay.
So there are other people who should be joining us, but we'll go ahead because we have half an hour to have our conversation. And then at 7:30, the participants may engage us, and then we end at 8. In hindsight, I ought to have named tonight's discussion intergenerational because it's several generations of Belizean people who have been impoverished. That means you're made to live in this state of lacking. And so one of the benchmarks that I often use is the 1838 benchmark of when enslaved African people were physically liberated from enslavement, meaning not having physical shackles on us anymore. And so I wanted to quickly just quote from and let Brother Tate jump in. I'm quoting from this book, Colonialism and Resistance in Belize, Essays in Historical Sociology by O. Nigel Boland. And this was first published in 1988. I'll just read a paragraph from chapter 6. It's called Labor Control and Resistance in Belize in the Century After 1838. And this is why knowing our stories is absolutely important because it impacts our everyday lives. And this paragraph reads, if we avoid the simple antimony of slavery and freedom, we're better able to view the mid-19th century as a period of transition from one system of domination to another, each involving distinct forms of labor control and patterns of labor resistance. While it is inconceivable that the abolition of slavery in 1834 and the apprenticeship system in 1838 changed the prevailing forms of domination in the British West Indies, we should distinguish between the ideological claims made about the new system and its reality. Given the fact that a variety of forms of coercion persisted on a large scale throughout the West Indies long after 1838, we cannot agree that real freedom or human emancipation was achieved at that date. Final sentence. Just as we have learned to identify and distinguish between varieties of legal bondage, so too we must learn to identify and distinguish between forms of coercion that exist in societies in which labor is legally free. So with that backdrop, and that's why I'm saying intergenerational impoverishment, that a group of people intentionally created a situation looking at the time from when our African ancestors were kidnapped and brought across the Atlantic Ocean against their will, primarily to provide free labor. So understanding that system, we are still in systems of oppression, such as the economic system of capitalism, but we need to go back Sankofa to come forward. So Brother Tate, I wanted to know your position of different forms of coercion. Pretty much the same players are dominating labor, and historically people have resisted. But because we don't know our stories in its fullness, especially African Black people in Belize, we don't know, we don't have something to hold on to give us confidence, to understand why we should value what we have. What's your 2 cents, Brother Tate? Good night, Brother Nelson.
I agree, Sister Yaya, and I think you have put the nail on the head when you spoke of, yes, Brother Nelson, when you spoke of not only generational, but intergenerational, where the systems have been set up. And I don't know if you have been paying attention to what's happening at COP26, but the obligations that people had agreed to is not being fulfilled So when we go back to the table after 25 cups that have existed before, people are saying, but we have already done this 25 times. Why do we want to do it another 25 times when we're asking for the obligations that you said you would have fulfilled 25 times before now? So it is explaining to people that some of what is happening and how does labor and all the other components of development, which includes labor, capital, and all the other things that we need to look at. Because at some point in time, Sister Yaya, I don't even think we are oppressed. I think we believe that your mic is muted. I don't think we understand that level of oppression because of the fact that it's just innate in us. And then how do we then overcome that system to be able to gain access to some of the basics, not only, and when you look at Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs, it's just physiological, just to be able to survive. And I think we as a people will have to figure out a way of how it is that we could it's like re-educate ourselves then.
I agree with you totally. And so there's an international organization known as the International Network of Scholars and Activists for African Reparations, INASAR. And a part of their reparation call is that they're looking at menticide. They're looking at people's entire identity being captured from them. And then another dominating identity imposed on us, for example, with our names, that we're disconnected from our legacy that gives us our identity as African people. So all that is a part of reparation. And so, good night, Brother Hubert. And so I totally, going back into our histories, so absolutely important. I was looking at this other book. Not telling me I don't have my page. Yeah, it's page 85. Let's see how good I am. Yep, I'm good. I'm looking at this one. And this is from Colony to Nation, Women Activists and the Gendering of Politics in Belize, 1912 to 1982. Because class, as in impoverished people, working class people, and then the other group of people who will be middle class and then your elite, had everything to do with the modern Belize. And so oftentimes, women who were, especially impoverished women who were instrumental in the, I think it's the 1898 uprising. I don't remember if it's 1894 or 1898, I'll check. That uprising, the 1919 uprising, women, absolutely impoverished women and children, instrumental. Yet when you listen to the national narrative, these women in particular, dark-skinned, Black woman written out. So let me read this one sentence. It says, in connecting political history and gender studies, this book clearly shows that the making of modern Belize was a gendered process in which women of all ethnic groups were actors. Now, most of us, again, do not know the stories of the resistance. It's 1894, the 1894 riot. Now listen to this. What amazes me when I read these things is the level of political awareness. We're talking about 1894. How much years is that after the physical liberation of, and let's be clear, during the physical enslavement of our African people, our people resisted in all sorts of ways. Running away, 56 years after the physical liberation of African people, they had the 1894 labor rights. Listen to what I want, Brother Tate, Nelson, Hubert, listen to what I want. It says, as the colonial authorities moved toward currency devaluation after September 1894, public anger rose, erupting first in a police force mutiny over pay, and then in the riot carried out by women and children and woodcutters before Christmas. Remember now, this is 1894. The riot was preceded by a delegation of workers calling on the governor with a petition for increased wages and carrying a banner reading, "Justice we desire." Listen to this last sentence. Led by John Alexander Tom, the petitioners identified themselves, quote, as the real inhabitants of this colony, those who toiled in the forest to produce its wealth, but were, quote, without anyone to protect their interests, while both councils are filled with merchants and other employers of laborers, end quote. You hear the clarity what them people had about their position. I am just wow. Your 2 cents, Brother Tate.
The reason I believe for that too, Sister Yaya, was because of the fact that people didn't have this much information. So a lot of the times people had to read. If you didn't read, you wouldn't know. And yes, because of the 1838, after emancipation, people required an education, in my mind, on my understanding, to be able to ensure that they were politically engaged. Now we have so much information, but yet we're not engaged. So my hope is that shows like this and efforts like this can start to engage people, to be able to, for them to be able to understand why it is that they need to participate, get engaged, and try to understand how these things affect them as an individual and their families as well. Because if we cannot tie some of these issues as it pertains to our political awareness, I can only see a lot more pain coming in the future if we are not cognizant of what it is that we collectively, I as an individual, have to know my rights and responsibility. But I also believe too that it is a collective approach where we try one full basket, no, Sister Yaya?
It so happens, here we go again, that I'll be hosting WB tomorrow again.
Oh, wonderful. Yay. Excellent, Sister Yaya.
You know, for bigger people here, you know.
Very good, Sister Yaya. Very good. Excellent. You did a good show. You did a good job last week, Sister Yaya.
I said to people, I've been on and off hosting or co-hosting WB going on 16 years on and off. And last Friday was the most natural I have ever felt doing that. It's a different audience. It's a different need. It's a different connection with people. And so one of the things I definitely want to focus on tomorrow is what is organizing and what it means to create a campaign. It's very structured. It's for the good of all. And it's for people to listen, question, and when they leave that engagement, they ought to come away with at least one thing that they can use in their community to bring about collective change for everyone. But absolutely, we need all hands on deck for sure. And that's why I'm so grateful that we have this forum of Belizean workers' rights, because it's always about labor. I mean, absolutely. And it was, no, which one of my book there? I tell you, I have 101 book. Okay, this one, I bound it, right? But it's Belize New Vision, African and Maya Civilizations, the Heritage of a New Nation by Aoundofe Iyo, Froila Salam, and Francis Humphreys. Now, you can't tell me that my brother gave this a chapter, this name. This is a chapter 20. Here what the chapter name. From Settlement to Crown Colony, 19th Century Colonialism. Now, we're looking at state power and we look at the impoverishment of people. Now, I'm reading 2 paragraphs so people could understand that this was the evilness of them people for plot in advance. A little over 3 months after full freedom was declared, the free people were restricted from owning land when they were required by colonial office rule passed on 12th November 1838. I say ancestors are gonna mess with me. 12th November 1838. Today is the 11th of November. So tomorrow will be the 12th of November, 183 years ago. So things like this, the way I look out for and say, yes, ancestors, because there are no coincidences in life. So that rule was passed 12 November 1838 to pay £1 per acre of land instead of getting it as free crown grant. This regulation was passed to keep the workers dependent on wage labor and to discourage them from becoming independent small farmers or a peasantry. Then in 1856, the Laws in Force Act gave the elite freehold titles to their land, thereby legalizing the land monopoly that severely restricted working class land ownership. Hence, after emancipation, most of the labor force remained dependent on forestry. Only a small number of agricultural villages grew up in the interior and along river banks. Moreover, forestry, not cultivation, was the pre and post-emancipation experience of the majority of the labor force.
True.
In order to exploit the dependence of the workers on forestry, all that the forestocracy had to do was to use methods of labor control associated with the customs of forestry established during the long reign of slavery. See how the thing set, brother?
Yes.
See it?
Agreed. No. That's understood, Sister Yaya. Forestry was our first primary source of foreign exchange, because we used to export the logwoods and mahogany and all the other woods that were required to be exported. And then when we finished with logwood, then we realized that we needed to produce food for the local population. Then I think we moved. Brother Franz Smith had a book that he wrote on this history as well, looking at Belize's, documenting some of Belize's issues as it relates to the movement from forestry to agriculture. And it has taken us a very long time to not only diversify within agriculture, but also the issues of agro-processing and value added that are needed to be able to ensure that the primary production that we produce is also could be stored and used. So the history is just repeating itself, Sayaya. The history keeps repeating itself.
Because we don't know our history, we'd often say, why people don't want to farm? Not knowing that it was intentional, that people were not required to farm. If I'm not mistaken, but even been a law, Brother David Gibson I could tell you later on. But just to show people how serious this serious, right? But I tell you that how much hours Belizean by law are required to work per week?
By law now, it was 40 hours a week or 45, but that has been changed. I think it has changed now to 37.5 because of the hour that we lost, because 38.5 because we lost 1 hour for every day for the whole week. So that is part of the conversation we're having with our members, because it's creating a lot of disruption as it relates to being paid overtime. So we're trying to work out the details, but I think government has decided that they will cut back our hour from 39.5 or 40 hours a week or 45 to 38.5, because you get 1 hour less each day because of the pandemic and because of the loss in income. So that is being looked at as we speak in order to be able to address the issue of the work week, no?
Let me just make we get the sense of how serious this serious. And I really find this, and I got a lot of respect for this book. But anyways, I'm quote from it. Apprenticeship period to full emancipation, 1838. Only I read one paragraph. Bear in mind, Brother Tate just tell me. A special magistrate was appointed to each colony to oversee relations and enforce that the slaves were working a required 45 hours per week. The end of the apprenticeship period came early, since it was found that abuse and ill treatment of enslaved people had gotten worse. You see where the 45 hours come from?
Yes.
You see and so yes. These are systems that are still these systems of domination are still pretty much intact.
Right. And in the developed world, they are extending it or expanding it as well. So it's just a matter of time we get it.
Now, again, throughout this process, there has been resistance from labor. I'm trying to think, one of the things that and Brother Tia, feel free because you've been doing research as well. So you feel free for change or put in whatever it is that you may have found, especially as it relates to number.
I agree with the tenant sister. Yeah, I agree with the principle of where you're saying in terms of the history of where we were, where we are, and where we would like to go. And all of this comes out in the issues of, for the fact that the labor movement in this country subscribe to the International Labor Organization, some of the international standards and some of the issues that we have to address to be able to ensure that they are coded in some of our own laws, to update our laws to meet international recognized standards for labor, is something that I think the National Trade Union Congress of Belize is pushing for, to be able to ensure as part of its strategic plan for 2022 going forward, is to be able to ensure that some of these things could be done. Because of the work that Brother Dean and others have been doing with respect to the Cipriani College in Trinidad and Tobago, some of these efforts is to be able to ask government, push government, advocate for us to be able to ensure that some of these things could be done, where some of the conventions that we have signed. So we are going back to 1838 and that period. And we are still dealing with some of those same issues from the 19th century into the 21st century. And the hope is that hopefully we can get it right this time around, so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with it now in this era, that we are addressing these same concerns that they dealt with 200 years ago.
Well, what has proven to work is that when the majority of the impoverished and working class people understand or make these connections, because that's where the power is. It's always with the people. And we're talking to the choir here. We can't pretty much say this pretty much every week. One of the reasons why we're not to get the kind of eyes we get, that because I really know to push it. Like I don't put no ads for Creme TV, because I've never been a person who chased numbers. I believe in the philosophy, bill it and they will come. And then you can't always pay attention to the numbers. So this is something I just learned. So let's say on Facebook, you say, let's say I'm Media House, have mad numbers as far as viewership. It's not necessarily because those people are watching it, you know. You could pay money and they have an algorithm where one increase the numbers so that it's not that somebody is actually watching the entire program. They just scroll and they take 1/2 second, they count that as a viewer. Right. So the number of viewers, very misleading because you don't, but because advertisers would have said, well, I want to know how much eyeball the watcher hear my product, then tend to look at the numbers, but it's very deceptive, which is what the purpose of advertisement in the first place.
Right.
So for me, it's really, I'm empowered when I hear what our ancestors did. And it wasn't only our ancestors.
But it's also too, Sister Yaya, it's not only the issue of the numbers in terms of eyeballs and persons participating, but it's also the quality of the discourse to be able to ensure that once you come, if you come or when you come, at least you will be able to understand the history, understand where we are now, and what contributions you can make in the future. Because at some point in time, not everybody can stay and sit on the fence and do nothing. They have to get engaged, because the changes that are coming, not only from a technological standpoint, but also from labor, environment. The pandemic has shown a lot of weaknesses, and the hope is that people and labor can participate in this conversation to be able to add their 2 cents to the conversation, because many hands make work much lighter. And if we can get more participation and engagement, then the work becomes easier, because everybody can take off a piece of it, so that at the end of the day, it benefits the entire society, you know? And I think that's the key. How can we get people engaged? Because our ancestors were engaged, even though they didn't have the same kind of support that we have now, and the same kind of information we have now. So once we can get a bill of mass, I think the sky's the limit, no?
Or maybe brother at 7:30, which would, I mean, yeah, brother
7:25.
Gibson could tell us. I think it was, I don't remember it was 1912, but it was early 1900s when Maya people in the north pushed back. They wrote a number of petitions because they were complaining about the cost of rent. BEC in particular was charging a lot of rent. And so they were very clear, and it was Muslim men who agitated, and the crown was concerned about if these people don't feel that they're getting justice, they may take their work across the border. And for an extended period of time, the way I remember it, and one time I would go to the half hour going to look for it, the pretty much Orange Walk never have no tortilla. And indeed, they took their products across the border. And so it's to say, this is not just about talking, and it wasn't only Belizeans. I mean, it wasn't only people in Belize City. So when it came to, and this is where the People's United Party hijacked, because they have a different national narrative. The narrative for people, starting from the enslavement of African people, the late 1800, early 1900, the 1930s in particular, where you have working class women in Belize City and Dangriga. And then you had Maya sisters and brothers up north. We talk early 1900, organized and pushing back. We don't know those stories. I have to, and I say every week, if I don't send it to Ona by tomorrow, Ona hold me accountable. And it's because we have an interview by Sister Elfrida Race.
Yes, you
mentioned.
mentioned.
She voice. I'm not going to hear it.
Yes.
Have you sent it to Ona?
No. No, Sister Yaya.
No, she to tell you what she experienced.
Right.
And if you hear anything that other woman say,
yes,
sister and brother,
yes,
I had to tell her, no, can't listen to that Sankey where the political parties they sing, but we have another, I can put on my glasses so I could see. Another 2 minutes for a tape before we go to, what you got to say?
No, yes, I am in agreement, Sister. I like the history, because if you don't remember history, you have a tendency to repeat it, no? And I like the historical part of it, to be able to understand how it is that where we came from, what it is that we're trying to do, not only with the show, but in also educating our people, because it is through education and knowledge will we not repeat those same errors of the past by looking back. I love history. I love history in the sense that you have to remember, please not repeat what you have done before, so that it allows you to progress in a manner that enables you to move forward. Because one of the part of the conversation in this country is that we have never spoken about building wealth. We have always talked about how it is that I can get a job, pay my bills, and just go along as we can, as we do in life, versus to be able to figure out a way of how it is that we can say, I will take the little that I have, save some, if you can save, and then also look at how best you could look at other investments that would create generational wealth and intergenerational wealth, so that you could have this thing passed down to your children, that they can use it, so that they don't have to fight the same battles like we do now, as compared to what our ancestors had to fight then. So a lot of this work requires doing some of the understanding the past, understanding the present, and trying to improve your future, no? You're muted, Sister Yaya. Yes.
Most definitely. And I don't like this too. I don't like the word history, because it's really the patriarchal and oppressor story. I like Austria's Professor Baina Bella, or great sister from IT, which makes it inclusive, that everybody's story have value and have worth, which is why the bottom-up approach is so important. It's 7:30. Brother Tate, you ready for lead this session? You're not the co-host, Brother Tate. Everybody, every other Thursday, Brother Tate is the co-host, and the other Thursday is Brother Dean. So respect to the brothers.
Certainly.
Brother Tate, go to strong.
Please. Well, thanks, Sister Yaya. Anybody would like to add anything, please don't hesitate. The opportunity presents itself in order to understand some of this history that we have been trying to review and understand, and to see how best we could include.
Good night, brother. Good
Yeah,
night,
brother.
everybody.
Good night, brother Wade.
Mandela here.
Yes, man.
Good
Go ahead.
night.
I thought about 5-10 minutes ago, and as always, brother Theater on point. And first of all, let me say kudos to the organizers of this forum that has been going on for quite some months. I must apologize for not tuning in on a regular basis, but one of the things you said just now about learning from our experiences, understanding the stories of the past. You're right, you're spot on, but I think there is presently a big disconnect. How can we get the things that you guys are saying, which are spot on, to my generation, which basically are the future leaders? You know, you've been around the table for quite some while, Brother Tate, over better part of the last 20 years, Mr. Gibson as well. But the truth is, it's only the well-connected people like myself, meaning connected to good people like yourself, Brother Tate, that gets to hear this day in, day out. The larger population or of my generation that should be benefiting from things like this aren't. And so we have to find a way, in other words, to bridge that gap, you know? And I guess the big challenge or question is, how do we do it? How do we integrate what you guys are saying in today's day and age where we have mass media that works in our favor?
I agree, Brother Wade. It's a challenge, but I'm certainly sure we can overcome those challenges with the input of everybody in this conversation. Mr. Gibson, would you like to add anything, sir?
Yeah, I think Yaya made a point.
It wait, you know. It wait, cause you know I got things for drop out. We are the hell of rough and the show start. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead. Teach me.
She has me on a leash, right? So give me some slack. But I think what you're saying about what this platform has afforded and made possible is a dialogue that is, for me, is an evolving dialogue, because out of it comes certain ideas that, when put together, will provide a solid platform. As it is right now, I think you're live streaming. I think quite a few people are listening. So there is an audience out there. I don't know if you have a way of checking how many people are listening, but I certainly think that there's a need to broaden that, as well as that we should be looking in terms of the union structure and its public education and advocacy platform, how that is built up organizationally to have a maximum impact. One of the things that I have started to do is, and it's in the form of a PowerPoint that I'm soon going to be finished with, is something entitled Increasing Labor's Say in National Development Decision Making and Increasing Labor's Share in the National Income. And I use the framework of the analytical framework of political economy to look at the relationship between labor and capital. Because when you reduce it to the essence, that is what it has been, a relationship of labor and capital, which started out first by the attempt to enslave the indigenous people on the continent by the Europeans. That didn't work, and so the importation of people from Africa as slaves in the form of what you call a production mode called slavery. In the post-emancipation period, what you're looking at is a production mode called chattel labor, where this commissary type of thing was kept our people or working people virtually enslaved. Indentured labor is another form of that was introduced. What we have today is wage labor. But when we look, we tended to look at, I heard a comment made about foreign exchange coming in from forestry and so on. That is a pittance. most of what was made in the metropole, in London in particular, in New York, where mahogany used to be exported for a time. And so in terms of what was retained here by any kind of national wealth was retained by a small, narrow class capitalists, along with mercantile people, the merchants, who also benefited from the trade that occurred between Europe, Central America. Belize became the entrepot trade, it was called. So I'll quickly end, no need to. I'm saying that this forum has enabled me to bring things to this point, to be able to formulate something that I can share that could become a possible basis to look at what I have identified as a necessary thing for labor, and that is for labor to become on the basis of the understanding of history and the dynamics of the political economy of capitalism and labor in a society which is a mixed economy involving the state, capital, and labor, where labor is considered to be some kind of inanimate factor of production. So it's really, as you can see from this investment summit, it is really the state and capital that is working together. And this factor called labor has got to be subdued as a factor of production, which the cost of which has got to be maintained and subdued as part of that so-called development process. It's a neoliberal ideology that is prevailing at this time. So to cap it, I'm going to say at this stage, the objective has got to be workers' participation in management, in the decision-making process at the high level, and workers' determination of the share of the national wealth that accrues to workers as against what accrues to the capitalists in the form of rent, profits, return to investment. I'll stop it there. I have more to say, but very much learned to.
I tell you, brother,
well trained. Yeah.
When you talk long like that, you last me long time, you know. I learn best for you when you give in a bite size. Brother Mandela asked what can be done. Yeah, a couple months, but UEF is building for the first time our website with the intention of it being a community learning space.
Yeah.
We'll have curriculums, you could choose how you want to engage. And so that's what this space has become. It has become a real reasoning space. And I remember Musla Cynthia used to say in the 60s, I think, when we used to have discussion circles. You know about that, Brother David?
Was a part of
I think she said it has got a bliss and it does have discussion circles.
Oh yeah. There was like a readers group at the library. People like Leo Bradley and my aunt Alice Gibson was the chief librarian. They headed that up. Where
right, so
you learn to read. You became passionate about reading. Read anything, you know.
So that's what this has become, and there's a need for it. Kind of like, I don't like to use the word think tank, but because it's open to everyone in the community to share. I don't personally a big part citing sources. That my thing, because I don't have a lot of value now that I'm in my 50s for opinion, you know. How opinion not have evidence. And like anybody could just talk. For me, the knowledge is absolutely important to cite because that's a part of building a knowledge base and see how everything is interconnected. And the more knowledge you have, you naturally start to think differently, you move differently, and then you find that you have the courage to stand up when there's an injustice. But I don't want to hug the mic. This is up for the participants.
I had a question for Philip, actually. Unless somebody else wants to say something on this one.
Go ahead, Brother Gibson. Go right ahead.
All right. I looked at the labor force survey. I think the most recent one is 2020. I don't think it's 2021.
April 2021.
So
There's an April 2021 that was
Okay,
done.
well, I kind of went to the SIB website now.
Right, there is one coming up in September as well.
Okay,
Yes.
well, this was the annual, the cumulative thing, yeah,
Okay,
for
okay.
2020. I don't know, they don't have one for this year, which is
Not yet.
probably in January, I guess. But the point
Sure.
is that in terms of the categories, in terms of what was looked at, I looked at employment by occupation and employment by industry,
Mhm.
by major industries. So,
Right.
what I see missing is a breakdown on income, meaning total income earned by workers. And I know there's a formula for it. I was talking with Sylvan, and Sylvan Roberts used to be the former chief statistician, and he is very well versed in national income accounting. And so it would be good to see what out of that, once you know what has been earned by labor, then you can figure out what, in terms of looking at the gross national income, you can look at what is being earned from in terms of profits and rents and returns to investment. And once you do that, you will have a fairly good picture of the underpayment that is occurring to labor. In other words, suppression of income. And the proof of that will help to look at income inequality, which we already have a measure for, but not quantified.
Brother Gibson.
How much in dollars? I said, but why I'm saying this is because Philip is getting more and more into the whole matter of workers' empowerment and income and hours of work and so on. And these are things that can be measured and put labor in a better position
to make a better argument.
Negotiate.
Agreed.
I want to know which income you talk about. You talk about the parallel economy, and you can't do that and not look for the parallel economy.
Well, I just mentioned today to Philip about this invisible economy, unless you're talking about the informal economy, which is another area to be measured. We have an invisible economy also. That
okay, so wait, make I get something straight for you. You said that 3 economies we have?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, well, yes. Catch me up then. You have the formal.
Right. Informal.
Informal. What do you call the informal?
Informal economy is those that are not measured.
That SIB doesn't measure.
Example.
SIB doesn't measure it.
How much tacos people make?
Yes. How much the weed smokers make?
Okay, and what are the other
economy? You mean the weed sellers, please?
Or the weed sellers, sorry.
Yeah. That is invisible economy.
Yes.
Invisible
planters.
Yes.
Which one is that one, Brother Gibson?
Invisible economy is that which mysteriously keeps the Belizean economy buoyant. It finds a way to get into the system. Some of it is washed into the banking, laundered into the banking system. It's the proceeds arising from illicit activities, usually by organized crime, that largely in the Belize economy. And I put out a challenge to Philip this afternoon to say, well, maybe at this point, the FIU and the central banks should be getting together to see, thinking out of the box, how that can be harnessed. Because it's spent in certain ways, and people are, the people who are involved have found ways to do it, but there's a tremendous amount that has been unleashed. These are the proceeds of illicit activities, and that is a history that we have where a certain class of people have benefited from a range of illicit activities over a period of time, whether it was guns to the Confederacy during the American Civil War.
I got it.
Yeah,
is there any system that can measure those 3 economies as close as we could get it?
I think there's a way of measuring it, but it wouldn't be accurate. But the informal economy can be measured, and it's probably measured, but I don't see it reflected in any one of the SIB. It's not, I don't know how the SIB sets out to measure it, and Philip might know the informal sector, because it's an important sector. It's a sector, and if you see it now trying to be formalized through micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, especially the micro-sized enterprises. So I think increasingly you'll get a better idea now that seemingly some kind of loan lending will become available to this informal group, which
Right.
captures them into something that would maybe help them by way of becoming more business oriented in terms of management.
More formal.
So
More
how widespread that is,
Yes.
EFC involved and the best and Help for Progress and a number of even the credit unions and so on. And if you notice, the investment strategy of the IDB is to try to help these enterprises, because we realize that a significant amount of people who are below the poverty line are engaged or can become engaged in some form of activity there. Just to quickly
Let me ask, is there any oversight for IDB when they give money? Anybody go and do measurement and evaluation with IDB money?
IDB goes through a whole program of a process of project development. They have to do it within a framework of the government's investment program, and they then choose and agree upon with the government the strategic area that they would support. They're very meticulous about that. They're probably one of the most progressive lending institutions in terms of sensitivity to national needs.
Listen to me. Red flag go for me, you know. You can't forget where IDB come from. You can't forget what these are the things that just like, I'm like, yo, like I rate to know. We go along with the guy information, but I'm like, come on.
We know that imperialism funds the IDB. It's a question of what happens with IDB funds. There are limits. The IDB works within the framework of the World Bank and the IMF. So they are all subscribing, as they are right now, they are supporting this investment summit. So they are subscribing to a neoliberal platform, economic platform, which if you look at it historically, in terms of how it has been applied in Belize, mixed economy and so on, still leaves us with an economic model that has 60% of persons under the poverty line. Who benefits ultimately? So
I mean, even listen to that thing.
But you have
to get excited about that thing.
I'm not excited about it, but you have to be very clinical and methodical of looking at these sources.
Only thing I have to do is stay black and dead. I don't have to do nothing else.
True.
And I'm saying what Brother Tate said about looking at history to inform our present. Historically, our people's lives have not gotten better with these systems. Historically. And I don't like the band-aid business.
No, but that's why it's so important to understand that. And also, I look at what they are doing. They are supporting an investment summit. Who is at this investment summit? Is Labour there? No. Why not? Because there's a certain view about Labour that they have to keep them controlled. And they are not seem to be a critical part of this national development process.
Was the union at that investment gathering?
No, it wasn't invited.
See what I mean? So you have to understand. And this is where the advocacy has to come in, and that is why Labour has got to be organized to make demands and say, we have to be a part of this process.
Right.
And we have to be a part of determining the sharing of this national income.
Agreed.
Enjoy the discussion. I mean, it's quite high level discussion, and I think quite appropriate information has been passed by both Brother Tate and including Mandela too.
Look here, Brother Hubert, stop the ball like you are spectator sport. You could jump in for this conversation. You got knowledge.
Yeah, but the point though is that they make good points. I think my issue really has to do with the question of where is it that we are where we are in terms of our level of unionization. Very low level of unionization in Belize. I mean, we have less than 12% of the workforce that's been unionized, and you mentioned a question of organization, which I think really is a critical matter that we need to address. Indeed, why is it that we are not, as an organizer, we should be to be able to attract more persons to join the unions? It is a noble work, and it does have things to offer to workers. But why have we not been able to come out of this doldrum? You know, that's the question we need to find ourselves. And there's a lot of effort that we've made. But you're still at the point where we are very, very one of the countries who are way, way behind in terms of our level of union representation. That's the big question that we need to ask ourselves. What can we do about it, really and truly? And it goes back to the question of what you asked earlier about organization. How can we organize ourselves so that we can get more workers on board? And unless we do that, we don't have much choice, much chance in defending the rights of workers, you know.
Well, but I know with any relationship, you gotta got trust.
But you know, if I may quickly, you talk about the Cipriani Institute, making use of it. I said last week, I think you need 10 times what you're doing now to be happening to really build capacity in union representation that can become part of a broader education process. And unionization is one thing you want to achieve that. Supposedly we have the legal framework for that. But more important for me is political work by the union to sensitize the mass of people, the so-called people who are underqualified, as I've heard them described, much to my chagrin. You skilled workers, if you look at who are agricultural workers, who are the service workers, and the biggest groupings, and how much of them are unionized? So strategically, it's a question of NTUCB as the mainframe entity to be looking at this from a strategic perspective and seeing how it will do a surge over a short period of time to create an awareness of what this political economy is all about and how to maneuver in that and how to advocate and how to get power, because labor doesn't have any real power in our society.
You see how phone mindset different from mine? Has to keep the God at top down. I don't do top down. I do bottom up. The workers have the power. The workers, so I forget to the base.
But with education, what you're going to get there with, what you're going to say, you are able to organize something in terms of sensitization. What has happened over the past 20 years since the formation of UBAD, for example? What has been the grassroots education? How has it happened?
Listen to me. I tell people that's why it's so bragging. We don't show yourself, see yourself, be yourself, people. We got 52 years of Mandela. I don't got nothing else for say. Think we are one, do we are one. Nobody got that. So you could provide the information, but that's why reparation is so important. Then when you do what you do to one people, then it's understandable why we're in the state where we're globally. So there's a systematic way. It's going to take a while, but it's not as if we're not doing anything or as if our people never did anything. Our people have always been organized. We don't know their stories. And so when you know your stories, you're empowered by it.
How is
to
that
know
happening?
that we can do this.
How is it happening? How is it growing? How has it grown?
Well, brother, I had to tell you from my experience. Slow but sure. We are turtle it. Slow and steady win the race. So the fact that if there wasn't a zinc fence, there wouldn't be a UEF, we wouldn't even have this moment. Slow and steady win the race.
I think this
and
moment
so we're doing something different to get a different result.
What I will say to that is that here you have a union presence. And here you have a union presence that is the sort of remnants of a strong organized labor force, which was deliberately mashed up back in the 80s. It was the final stroke, out of which emerged finally you had the NTUCD, which is a much more diluted form of what existed. So this union used to work with its roots. This union originated in its roots and sensitized its roots. So what we are talking about is not top down. What we are talking about is creating a basis for education, but understanding that this education has got to be sufficiently analytical to create the awareness and consciousness of what the society is all about and how the society. So if it's supportive, it is not top down. That's the way I see it. I don't come and impose nothing. You can. You know, work. It's got to be from the roots, but how do you empower the roots? Ultimately, that is the objective.
I hear you, Mr. Gibson. I hear you. And I also hear the challenge. Rest assured, I'm working on that with respect to the same top down that Sister Yaya was mentioning. But it's to be able to do the top down by educating people about what the indicators mean so that they can understand how it is that that data helps their lives. Because of the way our economy functions, we have to be able to explain to people what the data and the indicator means to them, wherever they are. And even if it means that we have to bring it down to the lowest level and get a chalkboard out and explain what each component means for people to understand what gross national income means. what GDP means, what all these indicators mean to them, so that at the end of the day, we can start to build the kind of knowledge base that we would like for people to get engaged. I hear what you're saying very clearly. Sister Yaya?
All right, the almost time for we lock off anyways. Interesting that this week, Dr. Young and Medepa WB, I tell us that I mean, they listen to their people, you know. I'm like, here they talking about, oh, it's a complex issue and we need to go to the base. We don't just don't need to go to the base. Like Will Smith, like Will Mahia said, one never carry the people and what they're at the base. For a big delegate. Look at us. So I don't really got, I just listen to the people. I don't got a lot of confidence in the people in the leadership because one of the issues is trust. No, if I'm in knowledge, what people don't got degree. If I'm in knowledge to save Belizean people, yeah? So we can't just go for education business because they have people who have knowledge. In a leadership, not change. Again, what's wrong? So it cannot be just that. We have to peel back the layers and be real. And for me, there are two things. There's trust and there's consciousness. So if your mindset are not communal about for make me get and my people and get and you aspire to whiteness and white values, then you gotta do nothing for we.
Well,
and we have to be real about that.
I just have to say that I don't see nobody, this group where have that kind of perspective. We have to watch that out there mentality. Right at the top, this group. This group.
I just want to show this out there. I just want to show this out there. And I know you said that, hey, you know what I said? That wouldn't want to start, because I hold back because I know I'm not ready for this. But I just want to do one. I want to just show this out there.
Yeah.
How much people, when I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, over there? How much of you think the part of organized religion? I just ask you that. All right, you don't have to answer. I left it low right there. So
it's an important point because that is precisely what is part of the process that socializes the mind through the primary school, infant school, and so on into a certain system of how we are governed to accept what exists. That's a big problem, the educational system.
You hear what you just done say? You said nobody in this group. No, so I just got straight to the heart of the matter.
No, but then if you understand that, that's important that you understand what the system is all about. If you don't understand what this political system is all about.
But I'm saying, when you have people in leadership, and majority of them, and they are not even willing to open their mind to hear that.
That is where revolution comes in. How it happens is another matter.
Well, a part of the repair and the reparation is revolutionizing yourself. First and foremost.
Who will do it?
You, the individual, have to do it.
Exactly. But how? You see? So when I hear people talk about reparations and so on, I say, oh, the white man must want. No. It starts from inside. It's what happens here and how that is dealt with. And how
I had a young one here, because I know time to go, if I could jump in quickly.
Sure.
Yes, brother, jump in.
I had a young one here, right? And I don't know, I have to admit I'm not big on history, right? I know I'm an engineer. I'm a science-based person. But I also realized that this discussion about dwelling on the past and the white man mentality, the imperialist mentality, yes, it's a good one. But when I look at the pace at which the world is developing, a year ago we were talking about cryptocurrency. We were talking about e-governance and how do we make that transition to e-governance. The Prime Minister coming from COP talked about speaking to the leader from Estonia, and I believe Estonia is one of those countries that is well advanced in terms of e-governance, and the system that they're operating off is the blockchain technology. So in other words, while we're stuck trying to figure out how we're going to find a system for Belize, the world is advancing, the world is moving ahead. When you look at what came out of the last 2 days at the business summit, there is little to no space for labor there. Why? Because we still try to figure how we are controlling the way we think. When Virgin, by the time we figure that out, we done the fifth dimension, right? We still try to struggle.
Mandela, you didn't act like You act like that's something where we want to aspire to be. What the first world is? How you think they get it? Why don't they get natural resources? Brother, look, man. Make we try to get the last verse from Brother Tate. That's what I'm talking. When you don't know who you are, somebody else could define you, and your nose wide open and participate in that things going to destroy you, the planet, and unborn children. But we are talking more, Brother Mandela. Brother Philip, hurry up, wrap up, make we go at 8 o'clock. Quickly, Brother Philip, wait. Make Brother Mandela want to respond quickly. I got like half a second. Brother Hubert, then Brother Philip, we are lock up. Go ahead, Brother Mandela.
No, I have spent the better part of the last 20 years listening to this same discussion over and over, and I hear more and more less about how we're going to move and make that jump to first world. We have enough resources here, but we're black ourselves.
But I assure you,
move and develop resources.
You know, they had this conversation for the past 20 years. Not this conversation. I assure you. Because if you're going to have it, you know me, I say what I just don't say. Brother Hubert, go ahead.
I agree with you.
Brother Hubert, do you want to say something before?
No, go to. I think I made my contribution already. Go to.
You're muted, Sister.
Brother Nelson, Sister Arliss, I think no, Sister, I'm not sure. Sister Cynthia, anybody wants to say something before I give her a take the mic and we'll anybody?
No. I'm listening and learning.
Respect. Anybody else? Participants? All right, Brother Tate, you got the mic.
Thanks, Sister Yaya. Very fruitful conversation as per usual. The hope is that we could build on top of it to be able to ensure that we could keep the conversation real and to see how many information we could share with as many people as possible for them to understand the way forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's like, I have to put down these glasses and I say, well, that's about 2 minutes after 8. Thanks so much, everybody. Vibrant conversation. Tell somebody about it for next week. Go back and listen to it, take notes, do research. I really appreciate everybody taking the time and participating. And I like the vibes. So take care of yourself, and then I say, if I watch the
tomorrow morning,
I watch the man.
Tomorrow morning.
And I'm supposed to have no co-host with me. So if you say on a try call me and engage me here, now got me out there to talk for like half an hour, 45 minutes in Dubai, let call.
No problem, Sister. We'll engage.
All right, then, sisters and brothers. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Yes. Like politicians to support you. All right.
Now, Kali, show up after the people's face.
We enjoy the team.
Rent a crowd. This you big kind of rent a crowd.
No. We don't have to rent a crowd. We got credibility. We don't have to rent crowd.
Better man a run go China if you can't get nobody if you call in.
All right. Well done, brother.
Yeah, brother. That's our show.
Still around.
Sisters and brothers. Thanks. One love. Guidance.
Okay.
All right. Good night.
Night.
Good night, everybody.